Hi, I'm Vic Iyer of CIO Marketing Services. Modern cybersecurity is challenging as digital transformation efforts intensify while threats become more sophisticated and dangerous. In fact, 90% of security professionals say their organization is falling short when addressing cyber risk according to Foundry research. How do security teams both protect their businesses while supporting the kind of fast innovation that is becoming a hallmark of successful enterprise? In this webcast brought to you by Crowdstrike, we will discuss how security leaders can develop their strategies to overcome these challenges with experts Rob Hale from AWS and Zeki Turedi of Crowdstrike. And before we dive into the topic, let's find out a little bit more about our speakers. Zeki, perhaps you can kick off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience.
Hey, Vic, and thank you so much for having this session today. So Zeki Turedi, I'm Field CTO for Europe at Crowdstrike, mainly focused with our customers, our partners, supporting them on their tech strategy journey and their security maturity journey.
Great stuff. And Rob, same question to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. My name's Rob Hale. I'm the Principal Segment Leader for Security across EMEA at AWS. I've been with AWS for 6 years and around 26 years in security. So I lead our partner strategy to try and help customers to use the cloud to improve their security posture and reduce their business risk.
Thanks, Rob. Really looking forward to this conversation on a major topic of importance to CIOs and IT decision makers. Now, as I alluded to at the beginning of this, digital transformation is intensifying, and then so does the challenge for security teams. So, for example, Gartner predicted that 45% of global organizations will be impacted in some way by a supply chain attack. That's, of course, just one potential type of threat. There are others. So I'd like to get a sense of what challenges you're seeing right now. And Zeki, I'd like to come to you first.
Yeah, so I think the what's really interesting, the kind of the threats and the challenges to some degree haven't really changed. You mentioned supply chain. We've been talking about supply chain risks to businesses for a number of years. Same with ransomware. Those themes are not new, but actually what's happening technically and behind the scenes is massively changing. One being is that we're dealing with an ever-growing and more sophisticated threat actor. The threat actor of last week is very different to the threat actor next week. Their abilities are massively evolving, and they have never been as persistent and as lucrative business for them than before. And that means that they are investing in themselves, building brand new tools, using tools that's being sold to them by other criminal organizations. So on the other side of the fence is the barrier to entry has never been so low. So we're seeing more and more criminal groups realizing it's lucrative and trying to get into the action. And that just really means is that organizations are dealing with more and more attacks. We have small organizations that maybe dealt with one incident a year, dealing with hundreds every single month, with the exact same security budget and the exact same size security team. In some cases, non-existent security teams. And that challenge is not going to stop. It's unfortunately just growing every single day. So that's kind of a little bit of what we're seeing from the threat landscape.
Really interesting, Zeki. Rob, you've got tremendous experience. So I'm really interested to hear what you're seeing.
So ensuring your supply chain and partners have good security posture and processes, that's really, really important. And we see that as critical. And it's one of the reasons why at AWS, we ensure that our actual infrastructure is certified by standards like PCI, NIST, C5, for example. And we've also implemented help and controls for customers to secure their supply chain through the AWS marketplace. But if we take a step back, actually, it remains the fundamental security issues that still can cause a security event. So regardless of where your workloads are running, we see that DDoS attacks still in huge abundance against customers. So in a single quarter, we actually saw a 35% increase in DDoS events and detected a 256% increase in compromised instances. And so just through that motion, we protected about 106,000 DDoS attacks that prevented them from happening. And so we see our threat actors are actually continuing to try and exploit application vulnerabilities to gain unauthorized access to computing instances. So in 6 months, we have sensors that are dotted throughout the AWS infrastructure. And in 6 months, we processed about 224 million malware samples. And we distilled that down to about 28,500 unique types. So, threat actors are still trying to exploit the same vulnerabilities with new tools, new scale, etc. And so we extended things like guard duty, runtime protection to ECS and EKS environments. And of course, partners like Crowdstrike are really, really critical to making sure that you can see what's going on your compute instances and then be in a situation to deal with them. But the most common cause that we see is actually unintended disclosure of security credentials and secrets. And remember, that's another step that an attacker can use to then exploit application vulnerabilities. So, focusing on things like configuration and admin accounts, making sure you don't have overly permissive access, limiting access to human data, they're all key things that we see as really, really important, as well as making sure you have the right security controls and processes in place across all of your environments.
Really interesting, Rob, and I'm sure some of that will be resonating with our audience. And one of the key challenges that is impacting on security teams is technical debt. Our State of the CIO research found that upgrading outdated IT infrastructure was the top reason driving increased technology investment for 38% of respondents. So what are the risks in using what we might call legacy technology? Perhaps, Rob, you can pick this one up.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a great point. And when I mentioned earlier that, we see threat actors, they're continuing to try and exploit the app vulnerabilities to gain access to compute instances. So it's really important that security teams have good visibility on their vulnerabilities across all of their environments. And they have tested processes to try and mitigate and respond to any security events. So legacy OS, legacy apps, that continues to be a challenge. And it's one reason we see customers conducting app modernization programs to migrate and modernize their applications and build in the cloud, to try and get rid of those siloed monolithic architectures that, propagate a lot of the security vulnerabilities that in apps where, often no one's touched it for a long time. And sometimes, people are afraid to touch those apps because they might be business critical. So every security professional I know, they certainly have a long list of CVEs. I don't think anybody has forgotten about Log4j and working through that. So the challenge is often knowing what to focus on. And for that, you need context to be able to form effective remediation and have security in layers. And those layers have got to be consistent across all of your environments and all of your applications. So customers tell us they see a marked improvement to that security posture when they're migrating to the cloud. And the shared responsibility model actually helps them focus on things like configuration, vulnerabilities, and supporting the business priorities by taking things like physical security, data center security, etc., out of scope. And so we see customers who are able to implement, good what we call SHIPs, which is security health improvement programs, and gain support from stakeholders on the metrics around those. Those are the organizations that are able to make meaningful impacts on their security, whilst at the same time reducing their business risk.
Thank you, Rob. And Zeki, I'd love to get your reaction and your own thoughts as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, bringing bad memories of Log4j. No one loves a big vulnerability disclosure, especially just before Christmas. So fingers crossed we don't have anything this year. It's nice and peaceful. But I think technical debt's quite funny because the whole principle of technical debt is about identifying what you can't fix today, or a part of that program that you can't, or just simply you can't cost to engineer today. But the principle is to go back and reevaluate it and bring it into a project when possible. But the reality is majority of organizations will just go, it's too expensive, let's not bother. It's like Rob mentioned when talking about legacy infrastructure, or it's too important. Like if we have any downtime on this critical application, the business will be upset. It'll cost too much money to rebuild it. So let's just wait and leave it. But it's such a wrong mentality because, again, the principle of technical debt is to continuously reevaluate that technical debt, make sure that it's not technical debt for a long period of time, and make sure that the quickest opportunity you have, you start building it and rectifying it. But we still don't have that mentality, unfortunately, when it comes to infrastructure. But it's so important from a security mindset that we do, because as Rob mentioned, the vulnerability that today may not be a big risk to you could be a massive risk tomorrow. How long can you actually avoid that risk being detrimental to your business? And unfortunately, as we kind of had the conversations previously, the rate of attackers is massively getting excessive. They are looking for that vulnerability. They're looking for any opportunity to get into an organization. So that technical debt can't be continuous debt. It needs to be only for a short period of time. And the reality is, we all know this, legacy architecture is more vulnerable. And when you are able to invest that time into updating into a new application infrastructure, the opportunity to update and remove those vulnerabilities becomes so much quicker. So get the hard work done now, because it actually makes you a lot more agile, a lot more safe and secure for the long run. So that'll be my most important point to raise there.
I was going to say, I'd like to add to that around, sometimes aligning security to larger business motions like app modernization is a really, really key strategy to gaining support, because as Zeki mentioned, if you've got a really critical business application that's it's legacy, it's siloed, nobody's touched it for years because nobody dares to, but if anything goes wrong with that application, it's critical to the business. Conducting a security health improvement program on that, or just on that basis, is going to be difficult to get support for. But if your business is looking to save money, to migrate, to modernize, you can use that and that migration to the cloud and assessment to gain support. So actually, why don't we help with the security around that as we modernize the app to make it more accessible, to make employees able to use it more, and then you're aligning security to a business benefit, a direct business benefit, not just a cost and risk.
I would say, Rob, that's the smart way of doing it, right? Being more proactive. The other way of doing it is wait until something breaks, realize it needs to be fixed, and spend way more money trying to fix the problem after it's broken. I think that's the example we saw with Log4j. Lots of organizations realizing it was broken, they need to fix it rapidly, but it's a lot more easier to do it proactively rather than reactively.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, everyone wants to fund something when it breaks. But you don't see kind of the same eagerness to fund something when it's not broken and it's just working.
Yeah, it's very important points that you're raising, I think, and I'm sure it will resonate. And of course, the other thing that we often hear about from security teams is this idea of alert fatigue, because as businesses transform, security teams can become somewhat overwhelmed. But actually, Zeki, I think you're seeing something slightly different. That's motivating security leaders to consolidate their tools. So I'd just like to get a sense of what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, I will be honest, consolidation is a huge topic at the moment from organizations for many reasons. It's literally the top of every CIO or CISO I speak to in the last 6 months. Interestingly, consolidation comes in many ways. Most notably was the need to, as you mentioned, Vic, get rid of alert fatigue. It costs a lot of time for analysts having to jump into multiple technologies. But actually, what we've also started to see over the last several months is this real drive of consolidation when it comes to more of the economical challenges security teams are having. And actually, that comes back into a lot of the process and operational costs of running security teams as well. If you look at the kind of macroeconomical challenges we were having as organizations and businesses, this time last year, that has led to a lot of security teams not getting bigger budgets, but actually being told that they have to make do with the budget they've got today. In some cases, we've seen organizations actually shrink their security budgets. Now, from a security perspective, it's crazy, right? We've seen more and more attacks. Organizations are more vulnerable today than ever before. And for a security organization, they know that they need to be more mature, more safer and secure than they were last year during the last budget round. So trying to do more with less is really being the goal for a lot of security organizations. And that's where consolidation can be really, really beneficial. If you think about it, if you're investing in one platform, it means you're only having a team to to water and feed one technology rather than many. You're creating integrations or APIs or workflows with one tool, not many. And that actually saves huge amounts of time from a resources perspective, not only from, as an incident responder, only using one technology versus many, which can become convoluted and complex, but actually when you're just maintaining it, makes it a lot more efficient and easy. But also, it comes down to platforms. Platforms have the ability to do more as well with less. And that's really been the focus of Crowdstrike. You're out making sure that we can provide all of these security, but also IT outcomes and cloud security outcomes our customers require through that single platform. So bringing efficiencies across the board.
Thanks, Zeki. And Rob, love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and I agree with a lot of what Zeki was saying. And so security data, it's growing exponentially. I don't see any CISO and anyone I meet saying to me, "Hey, we don't have enough security data." They typically have, too much. But the challenge is, how do you deal with a number of alerts and events, and how do you gain context around that? But actually, some of that is the challenge is that. The data is often in proprietary formats. So if you have it in one tool, it might require parsing, it might require other processing to get it to work in another tool. And if you're in an incident response scenario where you have security events and you're either trying to gain context or respond to that, then you have a lot more steps to go through. And, the average enterprise has probably got 50 plus security tools within their toolkit that they need to, monitor, feed, water, update as well. And we've seen, obviously, security tools are potentially just as vulnerable in terms of, making sure they are up to date and secure. So it's really, really critical that, customers want to reduce the amount of security technical debt that they have, but they also want to get more out of their data. And so having those tools working together in a common format is really, really important. And so this is why, in 2023, AWS, along with partners such as CrowdStrike, we launched the Open Cybersecurity Schema Framework, so the OCSF. And that's to help normalize data, security data, in a format that all of your security tools can understand and actually work with. There's about 120 partners, including CrowdStrike, who are using that data format. And so customers are using the cloud and tools like Amazon Security Lake, which is built on those OCSF standards, and CrowdStrike to then centralize the data and add context to event. So they can go and effectively prioritize that event and act if needed. And so we're also seeing, customers use automation to try and gain insight and also to respond with automated playbooks, for example. And so we're seeing, a lot of customers are looking at how they use LLMs, and actually CrowdStrike have recently released Charlotte AI, which then helps you to build context into those security events. And that's going to help customers to mitigate them.
That's really interesting, Rob. And we have obviously spent quite a bit of time discussing the impact of digital transformation on security. But this isn't just a conversation about managing technology, but about business culture too. How can security teams actually become an enabler of innovation by embracing a shift left approach? And Rob, I'd love you to take this up.
Absolutely. It's a great question. Probably one of the most popular questions I get asked from customers is, how do we foster a good security culture? Because, we see security culture as critical to good security posture. And at Amazon, we have a phrase that every day is day one. If every day is day one, then security is job zero. It's the very first thing we think about. And in some of our culture, just to give you an idea, when you join Amazon, the very first training that you undergo is security. If you're a customer, the first tools that you actually interact with are security tools. It's IAM, for example, to create your account. You assign some permissions that create security groups. So security needs to be important to everyone, but they also need to be empowered and educated to actually help, because it's pointless having somebody who cares but can't do anything. And it's pointless having somebody who, has all the tools but doesn't care. So, I think one of the really important things to mention here is that security teams can't scale on their own. we can't solve this challenge with security, human beings. I haven't come across a customer who has, thousands and thousands of security professionals just dealing with cybersecurity. It's a cost. It doesn't work that way. So we need to build allies. We need to build allies and champions in different areas of the business that are both enabled and empowered, and they care. And so one of the good ways to do that is you can help developers to write good quality code, and you can do that at speed. But by writing good quality code, you're keeping security best practice in mind. And so you see a lot of customers who are using tools such as Code Whisperer, for example, to help coach developers as they're coding and building. And that accelerates development, because then you're not the no people at the end of a build cycle. You've got security built in. And they're also making security the easy option. And so developers want to build. Builders want to build is a key kind of tenet to how we operate. So help them do that securely. Make secure by default the easy option. And so we see kind of building good security policy and tool sets in repeatable environments based on current guidance. That is the making security the easy choice. If you make it the hard route, then humans are going to be humans. They're going to go around things. They're going to do things that get jobs done faster. And so we need to make sure that we're reducing security frictions. And so lastly, that what we see with organizations that kind of remain secure is that they've built this culture not just from the bottom up, but the top down. And this is probably one of the hardest things to achieve, but you need to make sure that your security metrics are measured and cared about by the board as much as they are by the builders, and at a similar level to financial risk. So having stakeholders that are business aligned, they're super, super important.
Thank you, Robin. Zeki, I'd love to get your thoughts on the culture issue.
Yeah, I think it's actually quite problematic, especially for security teams. I think they notoriously, traditionally, security has always been seen as the ones that will create friction. I think, as Rob mentioned, the teams that will always say no. And I think that history, which is really, quite frankly, wrong. It's very hard for security teams to be able to work with a lot of the security ops, so the cloud ops or architecture teams. And I think because of that unfortunate history that maybe it makes things complicated, security need to spend a lot of time on how they actually work from the steps. Security actually has been an innovator for a long time, and they have to remember that. The reality is we talk about things like LLMs and AI, but security teams have been using those for like last 10, 15 years. Those technologies to identify threat actors has been using AI a long time ago. A lot of the security teams have been using like Crowdstrike, a cloud platform. They've been using SaaS way before everyone else. And I think they have to remember that actually security teams have been right at the forefront of innovation for a long time. They've been using cloud a lot longer than some of their cloud architects colleagues, and use that to kind of help them, support them to embrace that digital transformation. But I also think they have to remember that they're there to build security into those workflows. So how can we make sure that security continues to be frictionless, doesn't cause issues, work with their partners with like CrowdStrike to make sure security can be integrated throughout the whole CI/CD pipelines, can be integrated into the tools they're using. And I think that's the most important aspect. There's always going to be problems up front, but once you can get through those frictions, we have an opportunity to solve a lot of the security issues, making sure security is integrated and part of a parity throughout the architecture.
Just to add to what Zeki said, actually, this has, if you can shift your security engagement left and your security measures left, then you're actually going to impact on the amount of data that you have to look at, because then you're not monitoring absolutely everything. If you know that you have good security practice built in, the right policies, the right configurations, the right tools in place, and that's templatized so developers can move fast securely, then actually what you're monitoring are exceptions to those rules. Has somebody turned off CloudTrail, for example, which is your immutable log in AWS that tells you everything that's going on? Have they disabled Crowdstrike or removed it from the build, for example. And so these are key things where you can then monitor and you can immediately build automation to take action. And so it's really, really critical to realize that if you shift left, it's a scaling mechanism as well as a cultural kind of movement.
Yeah, there's some great integrations with Crowdstrike and AWS at the moment, such as like auto deployment of sensors. Really easy to set up, right? But it needs that upfront conversations, and once they've happened, actually it's a lot easier than they may have thought before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the CrowdStrike threat report in 2023 actually says there's been a 95% increase in cloud exploitation. Cloud obviously underpins a lot of business innovation. So what must security teams do to ensure these transformations are secure? And Zeki, can you pick this one up?
Yeah, and again, we have to be quite careful of this because, what we are seeing from a threat landscape perspective is a massive interest in cloud architecture. And that's because, more and more organizations are actually investing in cloud. Cloud platforms actually provide so much better security out of the box than traditional legacy infrastructure. But we have to remember, if we have things misconfigured or people hand over passwords, they are going to be vulnerable. But what we also see is a lot of hybrid attacks. So adversary is very interested. Maybe they will, get into a legacy infrastructure and make their way into cloud and vice versa. The reality is, what's really important for organizations to be aware of is the attacker is going to try and target as much of the infrastructure as possible. They're going to try and get in whatever way possible. And then once they are in, they want to go as far and wide as they can to get an understanding of how that business is built. Where is the sensitive data? And that's why it's really important from a CrowdStrike perspective that you're not just looking at one side of the fence. You need to have full coverage. And you need to have full security parity across the board to make sure that, if an adversary does get in, you can track them, understand where they're moving, and most importantly, quickly stop them, remediate, and push them out of the network.
Thank you, Zeki. Rob, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's a really good handle. And I think, going back to what we said earlier, cloud is more prevalent. So, you're going to get more focus from adversaries trying to, get access wherever they can, whether that's on-prem, whether it's a legacy, application somewhere, or whether it's in the cloud. So it's really, really important to get a good handle on those basic security configurations. And that's, a real strength of the cloud is that you can do that. You can templatize. You can also automate a lot of those things, and you can do things like continuous monitoring, continuous compliance to detect those deviations from policies. So by doing that, you're then monitoring for those exceptions. But you do need to have that consistent security approach across all of your environments. And when you've done that, then you need to make sure that you have good, well-practiced response plans, and they're key. So, the best laid plans are great until they fail. So make sure they work, practice, break them. Once they've broken, learn and adapt, and then practice again. So it's really, really key to make sure that you have those in place and you're using tooling that supports you. And then I mentioned earlier around having consistent security controls and the monitoring of those are really important. And just make sure they're integrated with all of the environments, but particularly, where you have critical applications or you have critical data or access points. And so making sure that they are deployed, your tooling that you use on-prem is also integrated and gives you visibility and control in your EC2 environment or ECS environment or other containerized environment is really, really key. And make sure they're integrated with tools that your cloud provider provides you as well. So, CrowdStrike, for example, is integrated with GuardDuty to give visibility on behavior. It's integrated with Security Hub, which gives you, a prioritized list of security events that you need to be aware of, and into tools like IAM. Everything needs to be integrated together so you don't have silos within your security architecture. And then lastly, look, we're still seeing the basic security issues in the cloud that we see on-prem and elsewhere, but we have this additional scale. So make sure you have those strong ships, those security health improvement programs with executive sponsorship to make sure that you can deal with, security configuration, application vulnerabilities, and they're working effectively across all of your environments.
Thanks, Rob. Some really key points there on cloud security. And of course, we now have a largely hybrid working model in many businesses since the pandemic. What must security teams do to protect enterprises working across many territories, on many devices, in home and in the office? Rob, I'd love to get your thoughts.
It's a great question. And, since COVID, and, this has really kind of driven the drive for hybrid working. And guess what? Hybrid working is not going away. If anything, we see an increase in hybrid working, an increase in demand for, employees and prospective employees, who want to work from home or wherever they're productive. And in my role, I am, around Europe a lot. So I'm in random offices, working from home like I am today. But I can access the systems I need to access fully securely wherever I am. And that's really, really key. So security is probably the great enabler for hybrid working. So one of the things we need to make sure is that we reduce friction. So we don't make security the hard option because, frankly, security friction is going to lead to user frustration. And a frustrated user, they're going to find other ways to be productive. And that might mean that they start to move data around, for example. And that's not good for security policy and controls. So we need to provide secure access to it that's appropriate to the sensitivity, the access rights they have, and the needs of a user and organizations. So make security the enabler here. If we can, make sure that security is making employees more productive, working wherever they are with the same levels of security, that's a huge win for both the security visibility of the organization and for productivity and employee happiness.
Thanks, Rob. Really interesting insights there. Zeki, what would you add?
Yeah, I think we've actually been doing a very good job, especially after COVID, and really this whole focus around, dropping this idea of the perimeter and make sure that our devices, no matter what they are, and no matter what platform and how they're deployed, they're continuously safe. And I think that's a quite an interesting journey. We actually are going into more of a mobile world. You have laptops that are now shipped with 5G SIM cards built in, so they can be continuously connected to your corporate VPN. No matter where you are in the world, you'll be connecting into a local 5G network, and you don't have to worry about Wi-Fi anymore. That's the kind of future where we'll be. And to do that, we need to just be able to make sure we've got visibility into all of those assets. And when we talk about assets, we're talking about your laptops, your desktops, your virtual systems, be it in AWS, it needs to be, elastic container. We care, that's an asset. We just need to make sure we've got full visibility onto it, able to take that data, contextualize it together. We really shouldn't be worried anymore about an employee connecting to a Wi-Fi hotspot because, we've got that coverage. We know that asset is protected and we've got visibility into the asset as it moves, as it tries to interact with other tools, other applications. So really kind of this key focus of dropping the perimeter and focusing on protecting that asset, it allows us to be, not care anymore. I think we've come a great way from just a few years ago, if you remember, when everyone was panicking, trying to work from home, and now we think nothing of it. So we've come a long way, but still, I think a lot of organizations need to continue that focus, make sure we've got the right protection on those assets, and kind of moving forward on that strategy.
Absolutely. And we are now coming towards the end of this webcast. We've discussed so many aspects, but I'd like to get just a couple of key bullet points from you both. What key takeaways would you give to our audience? And Zeki, perhaps you can start.
Yeah, we've done a lot of focus around technology. I think we have to remember that people actually power the technology. So especially in cybersecurity is a quite a complex subject. It's a massively moving subject as well. So something that will be novel tomorrow will be we'll be looking at brand new attack scenarios we've never heard of before next week. So, make sure you're investing in the right people within your organization, within your security organization, and continue to invest in those people. But as well as that, we talked a lot about data today, and I think that's really the key. Our architectures, our infrastructure are rapidly evolving. Each of those components have very, very vital pieces of information that can allow us to identify, issues, misconfigurations, incidents, or even a potential breach. So it's really the next evolution is about making sure we get access to that data to make sure we don't have incidents. And if we are having one, we can identify it before it becomes a problem. So, if you're really looking into your security architecture, focus on what powers your business, how is your business ran, and how we can gain access to that data. And lastly, focus on the vulnerabilities, focus on getting rid of that legacy architecture and moving on to a new tech stack. It's horrible. It's painful. It's the conversation no one wants. But the reality is it's the most vulnerable part of your infrastructure that will not go away and will just get worse. So have those hard conversations today.
Thank you, Zeki. Your final points, Rob?
Yeah, I think some of this is going to be mirroring what Zeki's already said, but remember that security culture is key. We are not going to solve security by having huge human security teams. We need everybody within the organization to care and everybody enabled to help. And then the next thing is, cover the basics first. Well, that's from identity and controlling access to data through to having a handle on vulnerabilities and processes that actually work to mitigate them. And make sure your security controls are consistent across all of your environments. As Zeki said, an adversary will try and find multiple different ways into your environments. So you need to make sure that you have a security policy and control that's consistent across all of your areas. And then leverage the security data you have and ensure it's all speaking the same language. And so things like OCSF are a great help here. Tools that integrate together carry far more value for the security team than just siloed applications. And you can use things like, Charlotte AI, for example, and Security Lake to help build that context and help you scale. Remember, we're not going to solve this with humans alone. And then the next piece, and this feeds back into security culture, make security the department of yes, but, or yes, and. Don't be the no people, that come in at the end of a project and say, no, this isn't compliant. You need to shift left. You need to work with people to make security the easy option. And that enables you to conduct business securely and gain stakeholders for your programs because they have direct business benefit.
Thanks, Rob. Really interesting and very wise words. And that does bring us to the end of this webcast on rethinking security in the age of cloud. I'd like to thank Zeki and Rob for sharing their expert insights, as well as everyone who watched. If you want to find out more, you can check your on-screen console. Goodbye.